Now this, slightly embarrassingly, is one of my most prized possessions. It's made in Bristol using Raspberry Pi, and what it is, it's a perfect miniature Wi-Fi enabled replica of a station departure board. And what it shows me at the moment is all the trains leaving from Sevenoaks which I no longer have to catch because I'm working from home. Just a little bit of property advice, which is you don't have to move that far from London to get nice countryside. This is the view from my bathroom window, for example, and we're about half a mile outside the M25. So a lot of people think, well, I'd like to leave London, but in order to get something properly rural, you have to move to the Outer Hebrides. You don't. I grew up in the Wye Valley, and what I discovered is there's really nice countryside just inside the M25 towards the periphery, never mind outside. So a little bit of advice, if you do get sick of London, don't overcompensate. First feature, a soft close lid. You can't go wrong with that. It means the lid never falls on your genitals in midstream, okay? Then, no need to actually stockpile bog roll. Small amount of moist loo paper, if absolutely necessary. But the main feature is this, which I can demonstrate. Hit the button here. Out comes the proboscis. As you can see, it actually has a supple forward and back movement to remove the more stubborn particles. So I'll just press the button again and it'll stop. Beat that. Then when you're finished, maybe 1 or 2 sheets, no more, of dry paper, just to remove any remaining moisture, or failing that you can use something like a duckling or a kitten. Now here's just one final thing I'm going to big up in my new role as social influencer. It's this trespass chair, $39.95 from Argos. I've never been able to find one like it anywhere else in the world. And it has a swivel table, which you can either put to one side, but more pertinently, you can also swivel round in front of you to use as a laptop table if you want to work outdoors. Now, to be absolutely honest, I don't think the makers intended it for that purpose, but as a glorious kind of accident or a magnificent example of unintended consequences, it's the only chair that lets you work remotely in the sunshine. Just a little bit of reassurance that Ogilvy Kent is committed to its role in maintaining a healthy, clean environment. Something with a little bit of sentimental value, somewhere in this astounding group photo is my great uncle, who flew Lancasters and Wellingtons during the war on I think over 60 missions, believe it or not, and survived. I like it partly because my great uncle's in it, but also because I think it's pretty much the greatest group photograph ever taken. Now this absolutely hideous structure here is my home video conferencing rig. What I did is I bought a mic stand from a music store, and then you can clamp or screw various things onto it. You can see there's a clamped on anti-pop filter. At the end there's a Yeti microphone which sits just above my head. Then you have the webcam there. Underneath it a tablet stand, the obligatory ring light. You have to have one of those because otherwise if you're backlit you end up appearing on Zoom like a paedophile in a Channel 4 documentary, you know, with your face blacked out. And then you have to have a permanent set of headphones and a little tablet stand there. What I learned pretty quickly is that you've got to have the whole gamut of stuff set up and ready to use permanently in some tiny little space you've reserved in your own home. Because if you don't do that, the problem is you end up with 7 minutes to go before some Zoom call and you're desperately looking for your sodding headphones which have gone missing, or else you can't find the right USB cable. And that's kind of miserable. So what you effectively have to do is get a bit territorial and requisition about 10 square feet, and then have all this stuff set up and ready to plug in at a moment's notice. Now, having shown you around the edited highlights of my home, highly edited I might add, you haven't caught a glimpse of my extensive collection of Japanese hentai, for example, I'd just like to talk about something very home-related. And what we've discovered during the COVID lockdown is a completely different way of working. Now, even massive flexible working advocates like me 2 years ago never in our wildest moments proposed that the best way to work remotely is for everybody to go home and never to meet anybody physically. That would be deranged, under normal circumstances at least. But I think it's fair to say that having been forced to conduct this massive global simultaneous experiment, we've probably been significantly surprised by how well it's gone with some people some of the time. And I absolutely caveat that very strongly. Not everybody likes this. Really important to remember this. Depending on your circumstances, this is somewhere between a boon and a nightmare. However, for a surprisingly large number of people, at least some of the time, it's been significantly better. And there are all kinds of reasons, I think, why we've never done this before. It's much easier for extroverts to bully introverts than the other way around. So groups tend to have a natural bias towards excessive travel and activity, for instance. I noticed with my own team that when I gave them permission to work flexibly, no one ever did, because they saw it as a concession and they felt they were effectively burning reputational capital every time they took advantage of it. It was only when I said, no, you don't understand me, I actively want you to work from home, that people actually took up the option. And we 2 years ago started experimenting with Zoom Fridays, where everybody worked from home and we met up at the beginning and the end and then had some reasonable time in solitude to get on with high-intensity work. If you want to understand this better, read a very small, literally one page of A4 piece by Paul Graham of Y Combinator, which is called Maker Schedule versus Manager Schedule. And it explains how the nature of time is not linear or fungible. There are large numbers of people in many roles who need long blocks of discretionary, uninterrupted time in order to perform a useful function. So you can't simply swap and change about. That's the first point. I also think that the modern open plan office is neither sociability nor solitude. It's a terrible kind of compromise somewhere in between the two. And I'm not a fan of that either. But what I think we can say is that it's extraordinary when you think about it, how little experimentation is conducted over what you might call white-collar or managerial or administrative productivity. Whole technologies are introduced wholesale, like email, without anybody testing whether they in fact improve or accelerate the performance of useful activity. My theory has always been that email slows it down, that by making far too much of communication asynchronous, it adds a kind of insane delay to decisions that collectively could be taken in moments. And just to be a little bit confessional for a moment, I think we've all done this thing I'm about to admit to. Someone sends you an email at 8 o'clock at night, and it's quite important, it may even be urgent, but it requires 25 minutes intense work. And you think, oh shit, what do I do now? You go, I know, I'll find a tiny loophole in their request, and I'll buy time. So you reply and you go, great, I'd really love to help with this. When do you need it by? And deep down, you're not really asking that question at all. You're thinking, oh, thanks shit for that. I've just bought myself another 24 hours and I can go and watch Narcos. And when you look at it, the absence of experimentation in business life is shocking. Okay? We've never tried to do anything differently at all. We've never even looked at alternative possibilities. And as a result, I think there are a large number of people in business jobs who have started to use stress as a proxy measure for productivity. And I think this is catastrophic. They go, I'm really tired, I'm really stressed, and I've just got off a plane, therefore I must be a very important and useful person. Now, if you look at it, blue-collar workers have been tailorized, measured, and time and motioned within an inch of their lives, okay? And yet the same kind of scrutiny has never been paid to the activities of people in office jobs. And I think one of the conclusions we can draw from this crisis is we should have experimented a lot more, because it took a massive pandemic for us to even try doing something differently. And I think that's a terrible reflection on the extent to which management and managerial positions scrutinize their own activities.